Thank you for tuning in to the Untouchable Jessica Joan podcast. I'm Jessica Joan, and this is the safe space where we talk about the real stuff that no one's really talking about. So we're going to be diving into courage, clarity, and getting over shit. Because I know you got shit, we all got shit, and we need to get over it. So thank you for joining me on this ride. Here we go. Letters to lovers. You will no longer use my light to fill your holes and your wounds. I'm not in a space to collect wounded birds. I'm on my own path of healing, of self-love, replenishing my cuts and bruises with my own light and tender touch. You cannot lay in my bed if you are not content in your own, for my aloneness is far too whole and far too sweet, as I have sourced my own happiness from myself. I'm not looking for people, places, or things to light my light, for it is lit and illuminates on its own accord. I have no room for those who wish to just take, because they cannot feed their own soul. That is their own journey. I can break bread with those and share how I found my way, for there is no judgment here. I can strike the match of inspiration, but the lighting must be done on their own. Just like if you give a man a fish, he eats for one day. If you teach a man to fish, he eats for a lifetime. The more I shine, the more light I share. So please, if you are attempting to simply take, then I would not dare, for it will not harm me, but your own affairs. Remember, everything you need resides inside of you. Welcome back, everyone, to the Untouchable Jessica Joan podcast. Today, I have my wonderful and amazing Lomi teacher, Miss Jody Mountain of Lineage of Light. It's such an honor and a privilege to have her with me. She's tuning in from Maui. And today's episode, we're going to talk about doing the work and what is the work. So I've mentioned this in my episodes before, and I kind of say it a lot, but for me, doing the work is being able to sit with yourself, to really sit with the discomfort, with all of the parts of you that need to be seen, need to be loved, and all the traumas that are buried underneath that need to be looked at and excavated in order to elevate. And even today, I had an interesting morning. Let's see, how do I divulge without divulging too much? But basically, I've been working on a lot of stuff that has to do with my mother and abandonment issues. And that's been one of my biggest traumas for a long time. And it's something that I've worked a lot on, and I thought that I've already evolved out of. And then just like the work, it's never really done. There's always more depth to be had. And I recently was triggered by a conversation that I had with a friend, and I was not feeling like valued or seen. And the energy behind the way that I was responding was a little bit more intense than the situation called for, but I didn't realize that until afterwards. And then I dug deeper, and I had to ask myself, like, what is this really? And that's when I started to see visuals of me and my mom and feeling left behind. And I started to say, oh, okay, there's more work for me to be done here. So that's just a little share I have for you guys. And with no further ado, I am bringing on the Miss Famous Jody Mountain.
Aloha, Jessica Joan. Thank you so much for having me.
Aloha, Jody. So great to have you on. Thank you so much for, giving us this pleasure to have you on and share your wisdom and all your knowledge and your medicine with me and the audience.
Absolutely. My pleasure.
Yeah. So how I met Jody is I was reading this yoga magazine. I just like came across it one day. Spirit was guiding me to just pick up this magazine, and I read this incredible article, and just everything that was said in this article just really spoke to me and resonated with me. It just really penetrated me. And I looked down below, like, who's this author? And it was Jody. And I went on the internet and checked out her website, and even just all of the, you know, the purpose and the words behind her messaging on her website really resonated with me. And I wanted to do her Lomi retreat in Maui. And I got to do that. It was such an incredible opportunity. And I learned so much and got to shed a lot of myself and my false identities and the societal stuff, and just really have a deeper sense of awareness and connection with myself, my ancestors, the land, and so much more. So Jody, if you could tell us a little bit more about what it is that you do and Lomi and the practice behind it.
Sure, I'll try and put it in a nutshell. The field of Lomi Lomi is really huge. So Lomi Lomi is just the Hawaiian word for massage. So it just means to massage. And so in ancient times, every family or different families on different islands would have their specialty of Lomi Lomi, of how to treat various things. So if you had a problem in pregnancy, you would seek out that family on that island that carried that knowledge down about that particular issue. If you had a broken bone, you'd seek out a different family that had that knowledge being passed down. And so the practice of Lomi Lomi was, in general, or in the common practice, it was really infused in the community. It was something that brought about healing, reconnection, balance, harmony in the system. And most of those types of Lomi Lomi, that more common kind, has to do with fixing something. So you have to have, you would generally have a problem, and then you would go to the Kahuna Lomi Lomi, the expert in Lomi Lomi, and they would work with fixing that problem. This particular type of Lomi Lomi that I came to learn through my teacher, Kahu Abraham Kawai Awaia Makaiole Unyama, was from far ancient Hawaii. So it was practiced before the Polynesians even arrived here, to the original inhabitants, original indigenous inhabitants of that land. And fortunately for him, his family did not ever convert to any other religion other than the ancient wisdom that was passed through from the far ancient times. So he didn't have any filters in terms of how he saw the work, whereas many people in Hawaii, and particularly the kahuna, the spiritual teachers, the experts in their fields, they would have been converted most likely to Christianity. And then that practice, or that filter, kind of changed slightly, in my opinion, what they were offering. It's still very beautiful work. I don't mean to put down any other form of Lomi Lomi. It's profoundly beautiful and healing. This particular kind was practiced only in the temple space. You would have been worked on for 10 hours up to 15 days, 24 hours a day, with anywhere from 5 kahuna working with your system. And one of its original names was Ke Alahoku, the pathway to the stars. And the Hawaiians traced their ancestral lineage all the way back to the Pleiades, like many indigenous cultures do. And so this was a way to bring that person back to their origin point, back to a place where they were connected with all of their ancestry, all of their connection with source. And usually those people were leaders who were going to become leaders of their people. They were people who were becoming kahuna, and certain children coming of age, but certainly not everyone. It was a special ceremonial initiation event. And so that particular body work has within it a foundation, which is, again, this Kealahoku, the pathway to the stars. So the way the work was taught to me and the way I try to pass it on has to do with resonance, and has to do with how we resonate as human beings in our life. So this is below the level of our personality, of what we were taught growing up, what we think we know, what our parents taught us, what our religions taught us, how to be, what we should be, what we shouldn't be. This is kind of below that and in the level of life itself. And so the foundation of the work, Kahu called the work actually raising your internal speed. And I have come to know that as the speed at which we are in communion, which we communicate with our life force. Because when you think about it, no matter what thoughts anybody, you or me or anyone listening to this is having, what we think we're doing, we think we're listening to a podcast, we are liking or not liking some of the things we're hearing, we are maybe distracted and sending a text on our phone. So we have certain belief systems. So no matter about any of that, what is happening with all of us, 100% of us, is that our hearts are beating. Eyeballs are being lubricated. Our food is being digested. Our skin cells are disappearing and reappearing, being regrown at the rate of 1.5 million cells a day, I think is the statistic. So while we are busy in this tiny part of our awareness, the rest of us, 99% of our system, is life itself in operation, moving through us. And in this tradition, that life comes from the mystery. It comes from source. And so in a sense, in this paradigm anyway, the closest place that we can be in connection with source is right here in our bodies, right here, right now, in this breath, in this feeling in our feet, in this sensation, in this weight of our body sitting on the chair. And while these are things that the mind doesn't grasp very well because we take it for granted. So we've just been alive since we were born or before we were born. And we just go, yeah, of course, I'm alive. Now what do I do? You know? So so the work brings us back to finding a way to come into alignment more with that life force, to resonate more with that life force, and to allow that life force, that mystery, that source that is inhabiting us, to actually infuse the personality, the knowledge, the way we are in the world. So of course we have to act, we have to make decisions, we have to decide what to eat and not to eat. So I'm not saying that we delete our brains, but the moment we can allow more and more of the mystery to inform that personality, that brain, then we have more of a chance of actually following our life purpose. Because source is pouring through us, wanting us to be our optimum selves. So in essence, the way that we see ourselves, the way that we participate with our bodies, with our internal world and with our external world, the way we navigate, all of that creates frequency. All of that creates resonance. And we can't get away from that, no matter what stories we tell ourselves in our mind. So if I tell myself, oh, I'm a really kind and generous person, and then we get into certain situations that trigger us and we're like, no longer kind and generous. We're, ripping people off or stealing things because we feel lack, or whatever we're doing that is in conflict with that idea we have of ourselves. The truth of how we meet the world and how the world meets us is coming from the reality of our being, not from our thoughts about how we are. It's coming from a real vibrational resonance. And quantum physics is bearing up all of, it's discovering all of what ancient wisdom knew, which is that we are vibration. We are primarily vibration. Everything we encounter is vibration. And how those two vibrations meet each other is going to determine the outcome. How we meet, first of all, how we resonate, and then how we meet what is bouncing back to us. So the work is pretty deep.
Yes, it is.
Yeah. But what it boils down to, the foundation is this discrepancy, if you will, between the modern worldview and the ancient worldview. And, if we go back far enough in each of our ancestral lineages, all of us are indigenous, come from indigenous people. All of us have that instinct, that reverence, that connection with source and with life in us and around us. But we have had, I guess, millennia of programming and conditioning that we have created kind of a conceptual world, a world that we've come to believe in. And now, of course, in our current environmental crisis, we're getting to see that this conceptual world that we have made is no match for what's actually happening. So when I was growing up, we threw trash in the garbage and we thought it was going away. Now we discover that, it's all just one being. There's no such thing as a way. We are deeply affecting ourselves no matter what we do. And the ancient indigenous people knew that in the way that they cared for themselves, that they cared for the land. But having been programmed for so long, we were just on a track of probably what benefits me. What can I have more of? What can I do to be popular? How much money can I make? And what do I need to make me happy? What car, what boyfriend, what girlfriend, what. And while we were busy being preoccupied, life was continuing. And that's the exact same thing with our bodies. As we continue to be focused in our narrow attention, life is happening underneath it all. And the work is really about connecting with that life and about letting go of a lot, like you said in your introduction, letting go of a lot of our false identity, the identity believed in, but we're getting to learn certain things about it, which maybe aren't all true.
Right. I mean, one of the things that was really informative to me, in working with you in the retreat, is when I really started to dissect these concepts for myself. There were things that I felt naturally, but growing up in these systems and in these belief systems of the world, it's hard to see through those things and back to the actual truth unless you have someone to help, like, remove the veil for you, which, thankfully you did a lot. And one of the things that I really loved that resonates with me is not going deeply, or not subscribing to the polarity of things like good and bad. And so it's actually something I don't talk about much with most people, because my perception of how I view the world is that everything goes back to unconditional love. Because if you're really connected with source and really connected with spirit, even things like good and evil, like, are there actions and things that I would consider without love or without light, and it's just missing the thing that it essentially is? That's how I view it. And so I'd love for you to share some of the things you shared with me about this perception and deeper understanding and awareness.
Sure. Well, first I want to say that, thank you for your words, but I did not really give you anything that you didn't already have. So basically the retreat is an experiential experience. It's a visceral experience where you, if you remember, all the revelations that came out of you.
Right.
So what I do is provide a container for that to happen, but I don't actually say, hey, it's like this.
Right. No, absolutely. Thank you for clarifying that for them, for everyone listening. It's just being the container to help have these ideas be able to come through our individual vessels, and being the bouncing board to help us better break down these awarenesses.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's it. Because it's all inside of us, and you don't need anybody to resonate that way. You might need a little help remembering, but it's right there for everyone. So this idea, and it goes back to this Christian conversion idea. And I just want to say nothing against Christianity. I grew up Christian. My mom's devout. My dad is devout, and it's, in its essence, all of the religions carry, I think, a lot of beauty and assistance for mankind. But sometimes we take it to an extreme and it becomes distorted. And so my experience of that kind of filter, in which everything is divided into good and bad, right and wrong, light and dark. So the Christianity that I grew up in was that you want to strive to be with the light, you want to strive to be a good person, and you want to get away from the dark. And of course, the whole world is divided into what is light and dark, depending on, your upbringing. But basically, how that translates to us as humans is that inside of us, we become fractured. So we look at the inside of ourselves and go, well, this part of me is good, and this part of me is bad. And this bad part of me is unacceptable. And I have to get rid of that, or I have to suppress it because I don't want to be that person. I don't want to be that angry person, because anger is bad, right? And I don't want to be that sad person. I don't want to be depressed. So I'm just going to push that down, push that away, and try to make myself into a good person. At the root of Christianity is this idea that we were born in original sin. And so I feel like a lot of that teaching propels us to spend our whole lifetimes trying to get over that and trying to earn our way into heaven. A lot of fear of like not being a good person and dying and not going to heaven. And then what happens? Then I go to hell, the other polarity of that. So when I'm looking at myself, first of all, through this filter of this fractured filter, I'm not a whole person. And B, when I look out at the world, I see that same divide. And in ancient indigenous worldview, coming back to ancient wisdom, what we see is that everything was embraced as one being. Okay. So when you look at the earth is just one being. And there's no good part of the earth. There's no evil part of the earth. Nature is all just contributing to its own well-being constantly through the desert, through the rivers, through the oceans. Every ecosystem, every animal, every microorganism is contributing to the whole. We might look at parts of nature like tigers, and if we happen to be in the way of the tiger, then we think that's a bad thing. And conceivably that is a bad thing at that moment. But in its entirety, we are simply nature itself. We are that nature. And so if we can come more into a worldview that sees that everything is connected to everything else, everything is welcome. And not only that, the indigenous worldview shares that everything is a member of our family. So just as the indigenous people will look out at nature and say, well, this tree is my brother, and the earth is my mother, and the sun is my father, and the ocean is my sister. And really, to non-indigenous people, that sounds like, oh, isn't that a lovely idea? But to indigenous people, that's a real thing. That we recognize that blood, that life force that's in that tree, that's in that ocean, that's in those stars, is exactly the same life force, life blood that is in us. We are the same energy. And so looking inside of ourselves in that way as well can bring us to a place where everything inside of us is a member of our family. So if we have ever felt something, if we've ever had any experience, if we felt pain, sadness, sorrow, guilt, fear, those are all members of our family. And the more that we can recognize them as such, and instead of trying to slam the door in their face, push them down, drop them into a coffin, drop them into a vault, and just go, no, you shouldn't be here because you're not good. I was taught that I need to be like kind and light and generous and good. And what ends up happening, if many of your listeners have had this experience, is we can try that. But the truth is, again, with this life force truth that is vibrating through us, the truth is that it remains, that it is there, that it comes up sometimes, or you can feel it just like calling your attention. So the anger that I push down is like my uncle, my drunk uncle or whoever, knocking on the door going, come, I need to come in. I'm a member of your family. And you go, no. And then what happens when we don't do that? A little louder. And then what happens when we don't recognize that as a member of our family? Boom, the door smashes down. Then we're in some kind of crisis. Then we're in some kind of illness. Then we're in some kind of losing control where we are just flying off the handle or seeing red or getting ulcers or any number of things. So again, those things, those kind of quote unquote negative things, I don't see them as bad. I just see them as the body, the system, the life force trying to get our attention, to say, hey, I am a member of this family and I deserve to be heard. Every member deserves a place and deserves to be heard. So I like Kahu would talk about them like they were children. And I really love that, because when I look at all the things I'm feeling as children, and I imagine a real child coming to the door crying, my child, no less, coming to the door crying, something happened in the playground. And what do I slam the door in that child's face and tell it to go away and come back when it's happy? No, of course not. Nobody would. I take the child, I put it on my lap, I give it a hug. I say, what happened to you? What happened? Tell me everything. Oh, and so pushed you, and then your knee. And then I look at the knee and I treat it. I get a Band-Aid or whatever and kiss it and make it better. And so why is it with these beings inside of ourselves that are also upset that we want to just shove them away and make them go away because they're not okay for some reason? So as we come into this paradigm of the family, as we come into more and more willingness, acceptance, more and more ability to listen to all these children who are crying out to be heard, then the more we can come into more and more wholeness in ourselves. Now, the key to the family paradigm, or one of the keys, is that this greater being that we are, this life force energy, this mystery that is allowing us to even be alive right now, is a being that Kahu would call the head of our household. So when we're listening to these various family members, we are best served by being in this wide space where the head of our household dwells. And that is the being that is in us that can accept everything, that can hear everything, and that has our primary well-being as its top priority, our well-being. This is not a part of our personality. This is not a part of our brain. This is really what is at the essence of our breath. And so as we listen to all these family members, if we let ourselves take off with one of those family members, if we say, okay, anger, come and talk to me, tell me what's going on, and anger goes, well, there was this and there was this, and I hated this, I'm so pissed that somebody said this to me. And if we start diving into that family member, we start identifying totally with that family member, then we start getting completely pissed off. Like, yeah, hey, that was crap. I hated that. Hey, what am I going to say? You know what? I'm going to blah, blah, blah. Yeah. So now what happened is anger, that family member, has taken over the whole family. And then we're we are not seeing clearly. We're only seeing through the perspective of anger. And so when we're listening in this wider space of head of household, we have that space to hear this one crying, hear that one crying, hear everything that everybody has to say. We can even inhabit that. So when I'm sometimes listening to my sadness, I'll be crying. I'll be crying myself, but I won't be underneath the sadness. I won't be powerless because of that sadness. I won't be powerless because of that anger, because I'm aware that that is just a tiny part of me, and that in every moment, all of me exists. All of us exist in every moment. We can take our attention and narrow it to that one place and go all the way into that and forget that the rest of us is here, but it's just not the truth, and it doesn't serve us. So that's part of the navigation, part of the internal navigation. How do we meet ourselves on the inside? And again, that meeting creates a resonance. So if I am heading towards this wide space in myself, and I am listening, and I am allowing, but I'm not getting sucked into anybody, then that is going to be a completely different resonance than being sharply focused in one place and lost in that place.
So what are some some tips or guides for people that are, just starting to even be aware of this work? I've obviously been doing a lot of this work for a really long time, not knowing exactly what the work is, but just psychoanalyzing myself, sitting with myself, asking myself how I'm feeling. And so what are some basic ways that people can start to get in touch with their resonance and just even have that awareness with the work?
Right. Well, the first thing I would recommend, and probably the easiest thing to do, is to develop a habit of pausing, first of all. Because these default settings that we have are just that, they're automatic. So the way we've been programmed becomes like, I like to say, like the silence. When you live beside a highway and you first move there and you go, wow, this is really noisy. And then after a while, you don't hear the noise anymore. It's just, that is silent to you. And so it's the same thing with our default settings. Our knee-jerk responses to the world, quite probably, possibly anyway, are not in our highest and best good, and they're not the widest perception we could possibly have. They're just what we were taught. And so pausing as you move through the world, as you find yourself responding to something, see if you can just take a breath and pause. And the next thing I would say is, and it's going to sound a bit wacky to our Western minds, but this is directly from Indigenous wisdom, and that is to just allow any sensations, any rhythms, any feelings in your body, allow yourself to just open to what is here now. So it could be the feeling of the bottom of my foot on the floor. It could be the temperature of the air, or the feeling of the air as it goes through my nostrils. It could be my eyes blinking. It could be the heat or the air on my skin, the sun. So why I say that sounds a bit wacky to Western mind is there's no figuring any of that out. And our minds are so thirsty and so programmed to like fix it, figure it out, get it. And this pathway is not going to be a pathway in which the mind can be helpful like that. But what you are doing by just focusing on your body, on your sensations, and even if they're not significant sensations, just most people are probably wearing clothes. There's a feeling of my clothing touching my back. Anything that you can feel in your body in that pause is going to give a signal to your system that you are listening to life. And when we start listening to life, life responds. So
Mm.
it's like meeting any other person on the street. If I've got my eyes down and I'm just not engaging, I'm not paying attention, even if I know that person, there's not really going to be a meeting. But if as soon as I lift my eyes and I look into the other person's eyes and I go, hey, I know you. Hi. What happens? The other person goes, hey, right. Hi, how are you? And then there's a meeting. There's life meeting life. And it's exactly the same with our bodies. The other part of indigenous wisdom that I didn't say earlier is that everything is alive inside of us, as we talked about, but everything has consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
So actual, more than intelligence, like a soul. And, you know, that again might be a tough leap for the Western mind. Like, this is my body. I don't have a soul in my cells. But this is what the pathway, this is how the pathway directs us. That mystery is alive and awake, and it is conscious. And so when you greet another conscious being, that conscious being wakes up and says, hey, I see you. And then what happens is we start to move together. We start to move in cooperation with each other, rather than me just telling this system what to do, where to go, how to get there. And then sometimes it's successful and sometimes it's not. When I start working in cooperation with life, all of a sudden there's a lot more harmony. There's a lot more flow. There's a lot more miracle arising in life, because I'm now working with that force of creation. And so I don't expect people to believe me just from listening, because it is a bit of a stretch. But what I would suggest is that you try it, and then you'll see. And the proof will be in the pudding, and basically you are the pudding. So give it a shot and see how that expands for you or not.
Yeah, I mean, you don't have to take our words for it. All of it is, is an offering to invite you to do a deeper dive within yourself. And, like Jody was saying, even just in the retreat and getting to experience these tools, everything was experiential. I mean, I can't say too much about what happened in the retreat, but it was a lot of me meeting myself. And that's how I was able to shed a lot of the things that are not me and identify these things with myself. And a lot of that came from the fact that we were in an environment where it was quiet, it was peaceful. There was this time and space that I was giving to myself to have that exploration. And you don't have to go to Maui to do that. You can find somewhere naturey, go, even if there's like a quiet library, there's so many different ways we can access that. And I think even just the power of intention, of wanting to do the work, to grow, to experience these parts of yourself is also a huge part of the work.
Yeah, and a huge part of that is when you're in those spaces to listen. Just to listen. Our minds are used to this pathway from the mind into the body and the mind out into the world. These pathways are well traveled. We already know how to do that. What we don't do so much is listen. And the most powerful place I can suggest to listen is to the rhythms and the sensations in your body. Because you'll be speaking, you'll be contacting the mystery right closer than your breath. And when that mystery wakes up in you, then your mind will catch up, if you know what I mean. That's what Kahu said, the body gets it first and the mind catches up later. Because the body is far wiser than the mind in this paradigm. So yeah, go out in nature, be with your nature, be with the nature inside your body. Take that pause and listen.
So that you pretty much just did like at the end of every episode, I invite the audience to do something and I would have you do that. And I think you kind of just gave them the invitation of what to do. So
Yay.
it's perfectly in sync. So thank you so much, Jody, for joining us here and sharing this wisdom. Is there anything else that you would love to, share with the audience? Any last thoughts or helpful tips?
Well, it's a pleasure to be with you. Thank you so much. Yeah, is there anything else I would like to share? I guess one of the beauties of the work and of coming closer to yourself, I guess I want to tell people that you don't have to be afraid of what you'll find inside. Because when we're brought up with this good, bad, light, dark, right, wrong thing, we become quite afraid of the darkness. I'm quite afraid of being overtaken by the darkness. And, just like you said at the beginning, if at its essence, everything is light. And, when I was a little girl, I asked my mom, well, if God is everything, if God is everywhere, then who's the devil? Wasn't he made? Isn't at their essence everything part of that life force? And certainly, people may have kind of forgotten their life force. They might be living by different rules and regs that they think are more limiting. So yeah, I just encourage you to listen and know that at your core is pure light, and at the core of every family member, no matter how horrible they seem, is light. They find their rightful place in you, and then we become whole beings. You never know why we're having experiences and feelings. Maybe at some point we're going to need to help somebody else, like the work you did. You went through the fire more ways than one and more times than one. And now you're able to step out and go, hey, I know about that fire. Right? So in the end, what you've done is you've transmuted, you've taken those family members and they are now useful to you. So what you find, don't discount it and don't let it take over necessarily. You could have also drowned underneath of all of your fire, Jessica Joan, but you didn't. You went, you know what? I'm more than that. I'm more than just that. So stay in that wide space and don't be afraid. Because what is your wholeness and what is your greatest potential is waiting for you, just waiting to be heard. But we do have to hear everyone, not just the kind of stories that we want to hear.
Absolutely. Oh, that was so beautiful. And, to touch on what you were saying and how this kind of work and awareness, even prior to doing this work with you, just this innate thing that I had within myself in regards to the whole NXIVM experience, that within that curriculum of NXIVM and ESP, they actually told us to, like, it was supposed to be more science and, they talked about the five senses and they mentioned intuition, but how despicable and genius they were in creating this indoctrination was that they told us, so intuition's real. Like, yeah, intuition's something, but they just made us discount it. It's like, oh yeah, it's something, but it's just an afterthought. So really what they did was they cut us off from our intuition and our feelings. So if we were to feel a bodily sensation, which, now we're understanding it's our body communicating, it's source communicating with us. They told us that it's just a sensation.
Wow.
And so because I'm so deeply connected to my sensations and my awarenesses, after also going through many fires and making peace and understanding that these darker aspects or shadows are just part of life, it allowed me to hold on to these things and not just go drumming to their beat, and instead listening to mine, which is exactly why I was able to handle and execute things the way that I did, and, you know, essentially be the first woman to leave that, because I didn't allow myself to lose my connection with source, with myself, with these sensations, and have that understanding. So it's so important, and that's why I'm so grateful to have you on, to have people have a better understanding of what this means. Because I talk about the work, I talk about these different things, and there's so many layers of understanding of what this work is. But I always attribute it to self-awareness, 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 self-awareness. And the deeper that you get within your self-awareness, the more that you just can understand and see the world, see yourself, see the connectedness, and especially with nature, especially with one another, with the air. It's just, life becomes so juicy and so magical. And it's if you allow it to. But if you're stuck in your mind and not really connecting, you're not having a whole experience. It's just like the breath. Like, breath is life. If we don't have breath, we're dead. And most people aren't even fully breathing. You know, they're chest breathing. They're not fully encompassing that. So you're not bringing the oxygen to all of these cellular soul being within your beingness.
Absolutely. We are a conglomeration of life meeting life. The air is meeting our skin. The 100 trillion cells are doing things right now. It's all life meeting life. And that life will keep us safe, as it did for you in your listening. The minute we go up into our minds and just believe all the data, let's say, programming like Nexium was trying to throw your way, yeah, we can be in a lot of danger, and we can even do that to ourselves. We don't need an organization to do it. So yes,
absolutely. Well, this has been such a lovely chat. It's been so incredible. So Jody does these amazing retreats all over the world. If you could just tell our audience how they could find you, things that you have coming up.
Sure. Thank you. My website is lineageoflight.com. I also have lineageoflightonlineschool.com, and I am going to be teaching in Switzerland on June 21st to the 30th, a 10-day retreat coming up very soon. And then in August, I'll be teaching on Maui, August 12th to the 21st. And all that information is on the website. You can also email me at Jody, Jody, at lineageoflight.com.
Amazing. Thank you. And so the last, my little invitation for you all, and myself included, is I invite you to, in your quiet space with yourself, to greet all of these family members and just give them a hug. Just give them a hug. Okay. Thank you, everyone. This has been incredible. We will catch you next time. Thank you so much.
Aloha. Thank you for having me.
Aloha. Mahalo.
Mahalo.
Thank you again for tuning in. It means the world to me. And if you enjoyed this podcast and this episode, it would be so helpful if you subscribe, like, or comment. And this will allow this podcast to grow and for it to reach as many people as it can. So thank you again so much.